What is up, beautiful people? Welcome to episode 50. We hit the half-century mark of an untold narrative. And what better way to do that than feature a close friend of mine, and hopefully it's not awkward or too joking, and we actually get to some cool subject matters, featuring Marc Brosseau. I think that's how you say your last name?
Not quite, but close enough, I think. It's Marc V Brosseau, but
So,
there's so
Jesus.
many vowels in there, so it's easy to forgive.
Here I am. I started off by saying we're close friends. I can't even pronounce your last name.
I mean, my wife doesn't even have my last name, and out of convenience, because it is like it can be a tongue twister for some. It'd be hard if I took it personally. I think even my best friends mess it up sometimes, so it's really not a big deal.
Well, yeah, I will. I probably just won't call. I'll just call you Mark VB. I'll just go with that.
That's my preferred anyway. That's like my go-to.
All right. Where are you right now? Because I know things are shifting probably over the next couple of months, but where are you right now?
I'm in Dorchester, Massachusetts. I've been here for a little bit. I live here with my wife and in our zoo of pets. And she's just in the other room, so our place is not that big. So, and it's it's great. We're kind of like floating right now. We're prepping to move to Los Angeles. So
And
one thing in the works.
we will get to that in the future state of this episode as to why you're moving to Los Angeles. But yeah, just outside of Boston, Mass, which is great. So I honestly don't, like I mentioned offline, I don't really have any questions prepped. We're kind of just going to riff. We're going to talk about whatever you want to talk about. I think you do have a unique story. I know a little bit about, or a little insight into your life. Let's talk about and go back to like your Canadian days, because you are technically an immigrant into this country, and talk about maybe a little bit about your upbringing, how you got into design, why you chose industrial design as your background, and just go from there.
Yeah. It's a it's a it's a unique story, but as I've like been listening to your podcast, I've realized that maybe like my story, like maybe the particulars are unique about it, but it turns out to be like a pretty, it's a thing that I've heard similar paths that people have taken to getting into footwear, which is like starting in with an athletic background and then like being artistically inclined or just a maker, and then kind of how do you merge those two worlds when it comes to like starting a professional life, and like industrial design seems to like help people converge like their interests into like what they're into and like what they want to make. So my path is not dissimilar. Before I was in college, I actually on the path to go towards like medical professions, science fields. I was doing I was like doing in Quebec, we have like our own pre-college, and I was like on the pre-med track. And I was not disinterested in it. I was pretty good at it. But I, I was just like, I was good at it. So it was just kind of felt like a natural place to fall into. Like people, like, if you're good at math, they just like, kind of like, okay, well, you're going to be like an engineer or a doctor. So it just like fit the bucket. So I did that in parallel to being a semi-pro athlete. So I was on the provincial Quebec team for a number of years and the Canadian national team for biathlon.
So how did you, I knew that about you, but for those one that don't know what a biathlon is, can you explain that? And then two, how did you even get into that? And then how did you excel to that level of biathletism?
Yeah, it's a unique sport for sure. It's, for those who don't know, it's an Olympic sport that started like in Norway, like in the beginning of the century with like military games and stuff. and it's the combination of cross country skiing and shooting. So it's a winter sport. I always loved playing out in the snow. It was always like a big thing to me. And I was in this cadet movement, which we have in Canada. It's like, it's subsidized by the army, but it's free. It's for youth to just like learn leadership. It's kind of like scouts, but tied to the army. And there's all these like subsidized activities you can do with them, different sports. You can learn how to canoe and, play music and stuff. And I was at the end of that. It was kind of fun. My parents did it, and it was a whole family thing. And then someone just like brought this pamphlet to us, and I was already like on the precision shooting team, and they were like, come try this biathlon thing. And I was like 13, and I showed up, and I was terrible. I was really bad. I got really bad frostbite the first time. And like the first time I showed up was like the big annual race, and they just like signed us all up, and I did the race, and I came like dead last, like behind the only person that came in after me was someone who didn't finish the race. Like I was not good.
Yeah, that's not great, Mark.
No, it's not a great start. It's not like I was never like known for my like natural athletic abilities as a kid. It was just like, I was just like incredibly stubborn and tenacious. I've always like, I could never stand being like really bad at something. I'd do something, I'd be like, why do I like this so much? I'm so bad at it. And I would like the next year, I told my parents like, this is what I want to do. And I signed up, and my mom was like, you sure? And she like whipped me into shape. Like I was like training 5 a.m, skiing every day. I didn't really have the resources immediately around me. So like my mom coached me in the beginning, and she was ruthless. And that year I won my first local title. Like that same race that I came in last, I won the next year.
But what was it like? Did your mom know the sport? Like
No,
she
not
was
at
just
all.
like she was just like learning about it online and then telling you to get up at 5 a.m. to go skiing?
Oh yeah. Yeah. It was like literally we knew nothing about it. My dad was in the army growing up. And it was always like the irony of it all was like when my parents got married, she told him, was like, I'll never let you have firearms in the house. And then both her kids became biathletes.
Amazing.
And then, like I dragged my mom to our like firearms licenses. We like did it together, and they were like really hard on her because she like really didn't care that much. She was just like doing it so that she could drive us to practice. And they would be like, why are you here, man? Like, you want to get your hunting license? She's like, I'm here because I love my son. So
So
it's
how
been a good ride.
from that first year of training to like how many years did you do it? And then what, so I've had other past guests on this podcast who have had you mentioned a similar route, right, in terms of athletics into design or engineering or something similar, right? How many years did you do it before you realized that I'm good at this, but I'm not good enough to be like a top great Olympian? And then was it like an immediate switch off? And then how did you find your new path? And I know that's a loaded question with 3 questions, but like,
Yeah, there's like a few questions in there, but I I started when I was 13. That's when I was like not good at it. I picked up pretty quick. And then I took it very seriously. Uh, you know, all my money went to that. It was like, and my parents really supported me. I joined, uh, I raced into the provincial team. So I ended up doing it for like 10 years,
oh
a
shit.
little bit more, like 13 years with my coaching career at the end of it.
Oh wow.
Yeah, like it's from, from like, yeah, yeah, that makes
So
sense.
you put 10,000 hours into this sport for sure.
Oh
Easy.
yeah. Yeah. I used to shoot like at the peak of it, I would shoot like 15,000 rounds a year.
I don't know if that's a lot or a little, but it
It's
sounds
a,
like a lot.
it's a lot. Yeah. So, like, and shooting was like my I was a better shot than I was a skier. I was a good skier, but like, you know me physically, like I don't have the like typical build of a cross country skier.
Sure.
Usually they're like kind of cyclist looking, like
Yeah.
super svelte dudes, like skinny and tall. But I made with what I had. I gave it my all.
So what was that breaking point of like, okay, I've done this for a very big chunk of my life thus far, if not like half your life at that point, and then you're just like, okay, this isn't for me anymore. What was that like?
I always I was dreaming to get to, when I was on the national team, I kind of got my first taste of like what it was like to like truly travel and be in a hotel racing. A big part of the dream, outside of like, your ideas of what you'll get out of it, and just your love for the sport, it was like the idea that being on the World Cup, I would get to travel to Europe, to all these fun places. And as I was like knocking at the door of that, I was like on the junior national team. The next step is like kind of like Europe Cup, World Cup. You have to be full-time dedicated to that. I was pretty close to that, and it was time for me to go to school. And I was like, it was hard because not a lot of programs would allow me to do both together. So I kind of like tried to do both at that point, and it wasn't really working out that great. And it was also like slowing me down and figuring out what I actually wanted to do, because I was like kind of splitting my attention. And I kind of realized that like traveling for sport isn't like really glorious. You're like in a van with a bunch of dudes and girls who like are super kind of zealous about recovery and what you got to do. You can't really enjoy a place. Like you can try, there's off days, you can do stuff, but like your job is to perform when you're there, and you're just really focused on that. And then I started learning about design around then. What I was doing is that I was making custom biathlon rifles. Um, so like there's like this one rifle that everyone uses, but you get to a level in like the particulars of each person's anthropometrics and ergonomic are so unique, and you start getting your own attachments. And I started customizing and making rifles for people around me and myself, and I got really interested in like the maker part of it. I started like doing crazy airbrush paint jobs on all my rifles, and it was like that became, I put the same amount of dedication into that I did like the training. I had coaches give me shit, be like, "Are you gonna finish this rifle? Because like you need to show up, you know." um, so that kind of like turned a switch on to make me realize I had to be making stuff with my hands.
So like, what was it like, you're making stuff, you have that innate ability, but like, did you know about industrial design, or was it like through research, or like, how did you discover it? Because it seems like nobody ever knows what industrial design is in high school, unless like you're like a 1% of a 1%. So like, what was that transition like? And then, yeah.
Someone told me about industrial, my counselor in high school told me about it, and I was on that like med school track, so I was like, my parents are going to kill me, like I cannot go to art school, like and he was like, no, you could really merge your like, look at this, like you like Lance Armstrong, like look at his helmet, like someone made that, and that could be you could be making helmets, you could be making bikes, you could be doing this, making sports gear. And I was interested, and I kind of like put it in the back of my head, and I forgot about it for a long time. And when it was like my career was coming kind of to a close, but I hadn't realized yet. And I just like, one day I was like, nope, I don't want to do what I'm doing, and I'm going to give this a shot. And so I applied to one school. I had no portfolio because I was training. Um, I had cut out all my arts classes out of my schedules to
Right.
train. And so I like basically for like 6 months, I just buckled down and just like started making a portfolio from scratch. and I you know, like crazy imposter syndrome, being like, I was expected to go into a place where people had like just really been into the arts from a young age. And I was like, I don't know if I belong here, but I'm going to give this a shot. And I applied to the only ID school in Canada that was within an hour driving distance from a biathlon range, because I
Wow.
was still planning to race when I came in. And I immediately fell in love with the field. Like the first year, it was like, I transferred all my devotion to the sport, like that competitiveness, that attention to detail, like uh, transferred immediately into design. Um, and then that
So
was it. That was like,
you mentioned the transfer over. Was industrial design like it was with the biathleticism,
triathlon.
the biathlon, where it's like you sucked the first year and then you got better because you were so devoted, or were you like naturally like good at drawing or creating?
I had drawn my whole life.
Oh,
You know,
okay.
like my first year, they were teaching perspective, and I mean, had been drawing in perspective for years, but I didn't understand the theory.
Right.
Like I didn't know how to do it, and immediately, like as people held my hand, I just like was picking stuff up like crazy. Um, it, if I wasn't like a natural athlete and I kind of like muscled it in, when I was in design school, I certainly felt like it was way more natural for me. Like I felt like I'd found my place. I like was like the one of the first classes we took was like the history of industrial design.
Right.
And I like was reading the book like for fun. I was so into it. I was like, what do I have to do to create the kind of products that would have this kind of impact? Like, where's these people's mindset? And I immediately also noticed that like the people that were like really, really good at this were not necessarily following the rules that they were teaching us in school. And
Right.
like from the beginning, like my punk rock kind of like, you know, teenage rebellion came out. I was like already immediately like in my first and second year, like any rule I could break in a brief, but get away with it. Like it was, I was always looking for my angle to bend the box. And and some of my peers would get really frustrated with it because the professor would be like, "Well, it doesn't really follow the rules, but if you're going to break the rules, like this is how you break the rules." And
You
and
were
I was
that you were
like,
that you were that guy in industrial design class
yeah.
who's always pushing the limits, who's talented, who's like everybody else is like looking at the professor like I'm trying to follow the rules here. But that's the beautiful part of it, right? Like we're as creatives, you're supposed to kind of break the rules a little bit. Like you're supposed to tiptoe that line of the box.
Like I like a good example of that would be like when I was towards the end, I had decided I was going to do footwear, and projects weren't aligning with what I wanted to put in my portfolio. So they're like, it was like a basically meant to be a furniture class, and they were like, everyone makes storage, and we're going to have a clever storage system with hidden compartments and stuff. And I was like, I'm going to make a backpack. And they were like, well, that doesn't, you can't do that. I'm like, it's storage.
Oh my God.
They were like, fine, we'll do whatever you want.
um as you start gravitating towards focusing your career on footwear, I did look up on your website and you have your resume there. You did an internship in France. Am I correct in that? And was that internship ID related or footwear related?
It was traditional ID. Yeah. And it wasn't like it was very unstandard path. Like I learned very quickly to be successful, you had to leverage human connection. So after my second year, I took a sabbatical because they wouldn't let me like leave because I wasn't in my third year. The school was scared. I was like not prepared enough to go do this internship. And I was like, I'm going. Like
So
they
it
were
was,
like, well, if you come back, you know, there might not be a spot for you guaranteed. And I was like, fine, I'll go to another school. Like,
so you found this internship, you got this internship in the middle of schooling and they were like, you
didn't
might
want
not
me
have.
to go. No. They made me
Even
do
though,
another internship after, because we needed an internship to graduate, but they
right.
wanted you to do it after your third year. And you know, maybe like design wise, and like I definitely could have been better equipped, but I picked it up quick. I learned all the stuff that they don't teach you in design school in that first job. It was really cool. It's this small consultancy in Lyon, and the way I got this job was that one of the girls I was coaching, her dad was a pilot, and she was from France, and he had this childhood friend who ran this super successful small industrial design firm that had won a bunch of awards in France. And he was like, I'm just going to put you in contact with him. And because they were like, the education system for ideas is a little different in France, they had no real sense of like where I was in my education. Like the other intern next to me was finishing his master's. Um, yeah,
and,
it was
and
like,
here you are in your second, after your second year of college. Was it, so were you doing like real projects for them, or was it like kind of like real like intern work?
oh no, it was like by very quickly I had my own clients.
Wow.
Which was really frustrating because I was not paid well at all. In France, they have these like funny laws that if it's an internship, there's a salary cap.
Right.
Because if you're in France, if you're French, you get like all these government subsidies that I didn't have access to. So I was like paid like 400 euros a month, and like like billing this crazy hourly rate. And I was like, because I was the only person who spoke like really good English
Right.
in the office, like I ended up like running international accounts, like in terms of like running point on communication, translating bills and stuff. um, so it was like, in terms of like the business of design, it was a big eye opener. I got to work with really cool clients like TFAL and like the Krups group, who do like all the like home goods kind of stuff, baby products, like dumpsters, work with Michelin, and some like really, really funky, like also um, like UX and like urbanization kind of like design thinking exercises with
Right.
like government agencies on how to like communicate. We work with like the Paris subway system to like redesign their new like design ethos for like building new stations and stuff. It was a really like just
What a
the
wide
exposure
spectrum.
to products was crazy.
Yeah, what a spectrum of products. What's what's like one major thing that you learned from that 6-month internship? Because like I did a full year internship. It was technically 2 trimesters, and then I worked during school, so it ended up being a full year where I was a package design intern. And the one thing I took away from that was, it's similar. You wear a lot of hats, you do a lot of different things, and the experience was fantastic. But the one thing I learned was I didn't want to do package design for the rest of my life. So like, what's like one key takeaway that like you get gathered from those 6 months? And then, did you know you wanted to get in footwear at that point or not?
um I didn't know yet. It wasn't short after that I did. I ended up doing a lot of CAD. I was like the best SolidWorks guy in the office.
Okay.
I was really good and eventually ended up like teaching it at school. But I hated it. Like these like models that were like way more complex than anything I had tackled in school. And it was just like 40 hours a week, just looking at the same model for weeks and weeks, just like, and it was killing my computer all the time. Learning new software, they were like using Alias then, so I had to learn that like on the job, and it was really good experience. And I was like, I do not want to do CAD.
So you learned you didn't want to be a CAD monkey.
No, it was really it was a
So
real.
what happened right after that, right? So you go back to school. I'm assuming you fall back in line. They accepted you back, and then fast forwarding to graduation. There's not a ton, for those that don't know, there's not a ton of footwear companies in Canada, but there are some. They primarily do like boots, as you can imagine. There's a few that I could think of around Montreal, like Royer. What's the other one I was thinking
A
of?
lot of my friend grads ended up at like Power Athletic, which is owned by Bata in Toronto, and And then there's Native's a big one in Vancouver. You know, they do like Crocs, like kind of like molded wearable stuff. There's opportunities, but they're not like necessary. I mean, I would have been happy to work at all those places. When I was in my third year, I needed an internship to graduate. And I was like at the end of it and I couldn't find anything. And I got like a quick offer from Aldo. And I was like, okay, let's do it.
So you worked at Aldo for a bit.
I was gonna. In like, no joke, minutes before I was about to sign the contract, I get a call, cold call out of nowhere. And it's someone who works at Reebok. And they're looking for people for their apprentice program, which has been open for a long time, but they haven't filled all the seats. And they're like, do you want to do this? Like, you would fit the bill. We'll bring you in for an interview real quick. And I was like, absolutely. And then, so Aldo was off the table, and then Reebok was off the table.
Did you tell them that you were like in the midst of accepting an offer and like this had to be it?
I don't even know if I had the foresight to like kind of like haggle it.
It was like
I was like, I would have taken anything.
It was a guaranteed
top graphic design shop if I didn't have anything else.
But it was a guaranteed apprenticeship. Like they were like, because we haven't filled the position. Like we're offering this to you.
Like it starts in like 4 weeks.
Oh, okay, cool.
And that was the end of the year and everything. And I needed an internship to graduate. So
how did talk because like obviously a lot of the listeners are in the design space of this podcast. I think I know this story because I think I've asked you this before, but like how did Reebok find you? And like talk about that a little bit.
It was, at the time, it was core flop. I had this one project I'd done in school and I put it on there, and it was like crazy. It was like crazy amount of detail in it. Like there was too many pages. Like in retrospect, it was like this thing you learn to edit, and you're like, okay, it's not because I did it that it deserves to be seen, but there was just like a lot. And I basically had taught myself how to make shoes because I didn't have those resources at home. So I went to a leather goods store, and there was this super nice motorcycle riding trans woman who worked at the leather goods store where I bought the leathers to make my product. And because they didn't make good women's motorcycling riding boots in US 12 men's sizes, she learned to make her own boots. And she's the one who taught me how to make shoes.
No shit.
Like kind of old fashioned making.
Yeah. Did you like hang out in the shop and just make shoes?
She worked at the leather store. She helped me build leathers. And then she kind of like pointed me at resources on how to do stuff. And she would send me stuff. She would text me. And so shout out to Beth because she was phenomenal.
So Reebok saw this like all-encompassing project, even you making footwear.
I even made my own last because I didn't know any better. I made it like literally like an anatomical copy of my foot. So like the shoe didn't fit good. It fit like a sock. Like it was it had like toe shapes in it. It was weird, but yeah, I learned a lot. And then they saw that and I think they maybe saw how hungry I was, or maybe they had just like a huge vacuum and they needed to fill a spot. But I jumped on the opportunity. I was so pumped.
And you obviously took the apprenticeship. The apprenticeship led to a full-time job. And how long were you at Reebok, and kind of maybe from like a high macro level, like talk about some of because I know you've had a number of great accomplishments at Reebok in terms of projects and working with certain people. And, how long were you there, and kind of talk about your experience?
I mean, Reebok is so close to my heart for a number of reasons. I met my wife when I was in that first intern/apprenticeship.
Oh shit! Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I had to go back to school to graduate to get my visa. So we kind of split up because I had to go back home. And that year, my dad passed away very shortly after I came home. And this is like heavier stuff, but I was kind of like not sure I was going to graduate. It was just like, I was like kind of dragging my feet and like partying a lot and just kind of like doing anything I could to just get through it.
Sure.
And like very shortly after that, um, my old boss, one of my old bosses gets back to me and he's like, come back to do the apprenticeship again. Because I hadn't like done a whole year. Usually the apprenticeship is 1 year. And I was like, I didn't want to take another year off of school. So they're like, come back next when you're done school and you gotta get. And it was like the apprenticeship is a full-time job. It's a
Yeah, no, it's
fully
paid.
paid
Reebok does a nice job with their apprenticeship program for all things considered, right? Like, let's put that out on the table. I obviously we know a ton of people have gone through it, and they pay people. You're working on real projects. It's not like BS work, etc.
So like, my dad passes away, and it's like we're like in October, so the start of the school year, and Reebok reaches out. So it was like they hadn't even like opened the program for the next year. They were just like, we want you to come back. And I was like, I was in such a mess that it just was like the relief to not have to look for a job in this like super hectic fourth year, and like knowing that I'd be going back to Boston, where Lauren was, my wife, was like such a big, like it helped me kind of cruise through the rest of the year. Like it wasn't easy, but I didn't have to worry about like making the perfect portfolio. I just try to like enjoy the ride.
No, the carrot was at the end of the stick, except it was kind of like on a fishing line, and all you have to do is time had to catch up to it versus you constantly chase it.
Yeah.
That's
And I had such a good group of people that year around me. Just like a bunch of friends had ended up like skipping years and stuff and just all end up in the same class for a number of different reasons. And we just had like a really tight knit group. Half of them are like footwear designers now. And so we just like stuck together. And then I came back to Reebok, and I kind of deviated from the question, but
no, it's total. No, I appreciate you getting in depth, and I mean I think it matters, right? Because to me, I talk to a lot of people on here, and we obviously talk a lot about our careers. We talk about our jobs, and when you get real like that, and there's an emotional connection to a place, it's different, right? Like it's a job, but like it's extended to something more powerful than like just paying your bills, and like you have a higher respect for it, I guess.
yeah, I felt like they were there for me. Yeah, like I don't know if it wasn't. I don't know, like if it deserves that kind of intention, but um, it was just like they were there for me. They made it easier for me. They helped me get my visa, although like that's a whole other thing. But um, and like knowing I'd be coming back to Boston, and then so immediately like Lauren and I moved in together in Boston.
Damn, you guys move quick.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when it makes sense, it just makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I know both of you guys, so this totally makes sense to me, but like everybody else is like, oh, they like were together for a little bit. They took a year off, and now they're back and they're moving right into each other. So it's like, all right, let's giddy up and fast forward life.
I mean, we got engaged like not that long after that. And like you would have asked me in my like college years, like I was not like the marriage type. Um, but it worked, and I was just filled with motivation and inspiration. We had like life plans, goals, so we just our values aligned. She was just like an interested person, and I couldn't get enough of it, and I still can't. We're always making more plans.
And it helps that she's creative too, right? So
Oh,
like you guys literally just create things all the time, which is pretty cool.
we have
Um,
different fields because she's an interior designer. I've dated industrial designers, and that wasn't like always the best because like I'm super competitive. And to have like a competitive person and like you do the same thing, it gets weird. And like so we're not Lauren and I aren't competitive with each other. We're kind of like see ourselves a lot more like a team than like two individuals. Um, so it helps, you know. It also helps that she's like doesn't really give a shit about sneakers sometimes, so it can help me kind of like take it
that's
down.
it's your thing. It's not like a shared love.
Like,
So
oh yeah, that looks great, babe.
um so go looping full circle back to some of the things, like talk about, maybe like a project or two that you really loved, or that like elevated you as a creative during your time at Reebok, because I do eventually want to talk about, that looping all the way full circle back to how we started this conversation of you moving to LA. So what got you to the current point, right? Like what was a project or two that like you really loved working on, or that you had a lot of fun with?
The biggest one was like Soul Fury. That's when I met you. Was the launch for that shoe, and that was like in the works. That was like my. It was a team effort, but it was like of the things I worked on, it was like the first thing that I kind of like had my name on associated with. That was like a totally new upper, a totally new bottom. Like I designed the box for it. Like I was really maniacal of like trying to get onto every part of it as much as I could. We used the blueprint to make the paper in the box, and all this for a shoe that ended up like retailing for like $90. So like you maybe it didn't really like deserve that kind of attention, but I was just like so adamant that it had to be right because it was like my first chance at showing people like that I felt like I was at bat and I had to like hit a homer like right from the get-go.
That is amazing. I completely forgot about that project. I thought you were going to talk about like the million other things you got to work on, but that's so true that the Soul Fury was the reason why you were at Complex Con. And that is when we actually met. I mean, I think we knew each other through Instagram before that, but not like on a personal level. Um, and that trip, obviously I've gone on to talk about this, but like that's when we were all poolside at the hotel, very late night, and just talking and shooting the shit. And you're just like, man, we really got to work on something. And lo and behold, 2 years later, we officially a couple months ago launched the Zig Connecticut 2, which you
Yeah,
got to create and work on. And it was really that trip, the Soul Fury, a $90 shoe of you being maniacal about, that created that opportunity. So that's kind of cool. I never put it into that big of a perspective. Um,
that trip was like, I mean, I was always felt lucky to be in the industry because I wanted to be there, you know, and it could have gone a million other ways, but it's like, you know, you open the door or you wait for the door to open and you got to be ready to walk through it when it shows up. And then, but when that project came out, like I was just scrapping for attention. I mean, that kept going for a while. I just like this desire for recognition, for someone to tell me, like, Mark, you deserve to be at this table, you know? And and I really struggled with that personally. Like this like really big imposter syndrome. You like, you know, you talk big game, like you better show up to play.
so
Um,
because I've known you for a little bit, you've talked about imposter syndrome a lot. I'm gonna say over the past like year and a half, like and it's continual, not to a bad state, but it's like it's clearly on your mind a lot. And like talk about your process of um, what what goes through your brain that makes you think that you have imposter syndrome, or do you have it, or how have you gone past it, or like some of the key things that you've worked through? Because I agree with you. I think we grew up in a state of like even Instagram and footwear design where everybody was like seeking attention. They wanted their photo or their design reshared over and over, you know, through the Concept Kicks platform even or Calling All Creators were the really the first two. Was it like that kind of drive to get in front of everybody, or like how have you gotten past that? Because I agree with you. I don't think today you seek that same attention the same way that I don't either. I used to be the same. So like talk about like your imposter syndrome and kind of your process now.
Yeah, the imposter syndrome thing is a weird one. I don't even know if it is truly like the the real name for it. Maybe it's like the best way I found to put together this sentiment of like this deep desire for recognition. And it's not like that you feel like anything's owed to you, but it's just like you want to justify, sorry, you want to justify the time you put into it, and that maybe it's like recognition for, it's not so much sacrifice, but like, you know, your dedication. You want it to be, to have value to others the way it does to you. And when you let go of those things to focus on the things that bring you value, you start to grow immensely. um, I was a lot focused on trying to make the things that would impact other people. um, it was, I wanted to win. Like I wanted to make a splash. I wanted to make a difference
So
for
years
me.
into the industry now, many years in, do you think that you've why is there a fruit fly in here? Do you think that you've achieved that? Do you think that you've gotten there?
I mean, my road's still has a lot to go. I still have a lot to go, and I still have a lot of growth to do, but I've certainly moved along that path a lot better. I think why it's so front of mind, maybe you and I have talked about it a lot in our clubhouse room, and is that like me kind of getting to the next level that I'm at now, and the way that I look at design now, I had to get over some of that stuff. Part of it was like I did have to get a little bit of recognition for what I did to kind of like appease the ego. Like once I, almost like a kicking, screaming child, just kind of like, you know, appeasing that part of the ego. But it didn't take much, I think, to like kind of like, okay, I deserve to be here. Um, but then realizing that I shifted my focus a little bit in creation from like what people want me to make for them, as opposed to like what I truly believe in. Um, and shifting my, like I was kind of like saw design in this, you know, in school they kind of like teach you about the like dichotomy between like marketing and design and how like combative that relationship can be and this and that. And then like I kind of saw design on this pedestal as this thing that needed to be protected with ideals, and that I should be like a guardian of design, like, you know. And it was kind of a goofy idea. I mean, really, I've come to see my job as a designer not as a barrier, but as a guide. And the road to making something in the end, you know, whether your idea is the best or not is always debatable. But like, I've come to realize that like people, when they don't like fully on, they're not fully on board with what you're trying to make, it's usually because you haven't really set up the conversation why it's important to them to listen to you, why what you're doing matters for them, for the business, for, you know, the layout of where the brand sits in the general market, like those kind of conversations, like if someone doesn't get it, usually because you haven't guided them properly into your thought of why it mattered. And I think that's why the project that you and I worked together was, I mean, there was so many roadblocks on that project, but you know, the intent was real, and eventually just like those roadblocks just melted because, you know, we ended up speaking truth, you know, with our intention of what we were trying to create and staying true to that.
You are 1000% accurate in what you just said. And the key word that I kept thinking of was like context, right? It's like design is always going to be subjective. A good design, bad design to two different people is the opposite, and it will always be. But when you're able to contextualize it and speak in fact instead of opinion, the subjective part, it gets a lot easier to sell in or to provide value or to make it real to people because you've contextualized it. So you are 1000% correct. And I do believe, and maybe I haven't even thought about why it's been such a success in my opinion. It's because you were able to tell that, pun intended, tell that narrative on, you know, hey, here's where I see the value of Vibram on this product. And for X, Y, and Z reasons, look at what their track record and look where it can fill our holes on this product. And I think that's really special. And I think exactly what you just said is super true. Talking about Reebok being close to your heart, how difficult was it? Because I want to fast forward a little bit. How difficult was it to leave? Because, and then talk about kind of where you are today. Yeah.
It was the easiest and the hardest decision I had to make in a long time at the same time. The easiest, because like, you know, it just had, the relationship between me and the brand had run its course. Just in terms of like my own interest at the point I left, I had worked on almost every single footwear team, or at least in proximity through the innovation team. But like I had worked on every category that company had to offer. And also I was, you know, as businesses tend to streamline themselves, the types of projects that I was really interested in doing, like, were becoming sparser, and it just felt like I was growing out of it. That being said, the hard part, the people at that brand, just like the human connection. Most of my closest friends are still either like ex or current Reebok employees. You know, my connection there is very deeply rooted, and I don't know that it'll ever go away. A lot of my own design ethos and language lives within that archive now. And I'm very proud about it. I got to work with just like the most phenomenal people. You've met a lot of them.
Yeah, no, definitely. We've shared a lot of the same friends that are there, and they are all legends amongst themselves.
So, you know, I mean, I'll always have a place for that brand, the people of that brand in my heart. Like, no, you know, we'll see what the future brings for that brand. And
so talk about the new path that you're on and kind of the excitement behind it, and the position that you currently hold.
Yeah, so I'm currently the senior design lead for Ivy Park collaboration with Adidas, on the footwear side. It was a tremendous opportunity that came through Mel Kachtorian, that you know, and I got to meet her through IG and through our clubhouse rooms. So that was like incredibly rewarding. And so I had at Reebok, I had designed the first Cardi B collaboration, and worked on the second with Joey Camus that you interviewed on the podcast. I love that interview, by the way. It was really, really good. So it just felt like a good next step to expand my career. Um, and I mean, Adidas is also like really was like a really important part of my upbringing personally. Like it was biathlon's a sport that's really big in Germany.
Mm.
So like Adidas sponsors all the national teams. So there was just like Adidas was kind of like in the my athletic upbringing, the culture around my teenage years. So it just felt like such a big deal. Those three stripes just always felt like bigger than life to me. So that opportunity is just like, it just made sense. That's why it was an easy decision. It was just like, you know, my path is coming to an end here. And like, I just saw so much road opening up in front of me there. So I've been there for like 3-4 months, and it's been a really really interesting opportunity, and also to be at a place where like to start as a senior designer somewhere. Some places it can feel stifling sometimes. Like Reebok saw me grew from the lowest echelon of design, like starting really from the ground floor. And when you spend a lot of time, like time kind of evaporates sometimes, and some people like will always just see you as like the kid that started as an intern.
1000%. Yeah.
So there was, it was just time, and it was good timing. With it's in the news, like Reebok was for sale and stuff. It was just like there was a lot of uncertainty, and I was ready to go, and then LA seemed like a an interesting place for a Canadian kid to go like explore something totally different. Um,
Yeah, I think
hopefully I don't have to buy too much sunscreen.
yeah, man, I'm really jazzed up for you to take on a new challenge. You're gonna smash it over time, and really, we're over the next year plus, we're gonna see some of the products that you are able to work on and to crush and get through. So we'll all be on the lookout. I'm now 50 episodes in. I'm starting to think about who do I have on as return guests in the future? Because times changed. I mean, I've been doing this for a year and a half, and it's a long time where a lot of people have worked on new things or gone on and done different ventures. So this is good timing. We'll have to, you'll be one of the people to come back maybe
That means a lot. Really
after
appreciate
episode
you having
100.
me on here.
Yeah, no, this has been super good. I do want to ask you, I ask a lot of people, maybe 2 more questions or 3 more questions, depending on what pops in my brain. One, the first and foremost, which we haven't talked about, or I guess we kind of hinted at it because I said Marc V. Where can people find you? Before this started, you can Google search your name and put design next to it, and shit pops up. So you could do that. But where can people directly kind of follow your journey and see what you have to offer?
Well, I have my personal website, which is like my portfolio, but I don't know that that's like that interesting to most people, unless you're like specific to design. So that's Marc V Brosseau, one word. I'm not even sure. No, that's not what it is. It's Marc V Brosseau, one word, design.com.
We'll plug it below in the info.
You just like you did. Like if you write Marc Brosseau design, it pops up. Marc with a C. But the main place is like my work. So that's like my finished full portfolio. But like my general, like more organic flow comes to Instagram. So you can find me on Instagram at Marc VB, Marc _VEEBEE. And that's again Marc with a C. So that's like where I just put my design thoughts, the behind the scenes for design, and like more recently, like been doing some more like artsy projects on the side to
Oh,
kind of.
so I'm so happy you fucking brought this up because I was earlier in the episode, we have this continual theme for those listening, and I just got really excited because I was gonna ask one more question and we're gonna wrap it up, and now we're gonna ask two more questions. There's this continual theme with you about that's rooting back to making, right? With the rifles, with your getting your apprenticeship at Reebok, with making footwear, and most recently, probably what's given you the most, I'll call it quote unquote fame in terms of the internets, is your bootleg series. And that was one thing I was telling myself, like, remember to talk about that because it is super interesting. I'd love for you to talk about one, what it is, and then two, how did you like originally come up with the idea to do
Well, what it is an art project
it?
where I get to playfully poke at the business I work more directly in, which is streetwear, collaborations, energy partnerships for footwear. And you and I have had this conversation 100 times about like, do hyped up designs live up to the hype, and do those align with good design and this and that? And I always thought those were, I like could go into that with such depth, and I get really riled up about it, and I have, my point of view changes all the time. But I just wanted to create something that like poked fun at that, didn't take itself too seriously, and also poked fun at like my, because it's like kind of making fun of my own journey. And then how it came to be is kind of unique. One of my really, really good friends who through quarantine came and lived with us. Um, when he previously worked at Converse, and he had like adjacently worked on the his name's Josh Lofgreen. He's a big shout out. Um, he had done these chucks where he had real off-white laces because they were like all over the office, and he had written bootleg on the sole, and he had drawn the CDG heart on them. And I was like, that is, I mean, like most people would never dare to do something so blatant. And it's like, it's the joke that it's cool. It
Right.
is such in such like disregard for the whole thing. It is just so inherently like such a fuck you to everything, but at the same time it's so cheeky. I really love that, and I was like, I don't know if I could, like, people take me so literally sometimes, like I don't know if I can like get away with it. And I kept doing these designs for Reebok, and every time I do something interesting, at least like proportion and shape wise, the comments would just be like, Yeezy, 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 Yeezy. Like, it just like every time you do something interesting, it's a Yeezy. And it was like so frustrating. So I just like one day, I'm just like, someday I'm just gonna draw a Yeezy onto this to show them how different the shoes are.
Yeah.
And and then I start doing it, but like these start coming together really well. Like they're really crude. Usually I try, like in the beginning I was trying to spend no more than like 20 minutes making these. Um, and it was like, yeah, the first one was like some shoes that Jeremy Sully designed a few years ago, and I wasn't wearing them, and I just drew the 450 on them with a Sharpie, and I was just like, there you go, Yeezys.
But then this like series, I don't know if you're like 9, 10, 11 in, but like this series, then you guys got really in depth by like making Instagram reels, making these very funny videos of you jumping into shit, and like you guys got really artistic with it.
Yeah, I mean the filming the stuff takes like way longer than making the stuff, which is like the, and like I film most of it myself, but inevitably the intro I need Lauren's help.
Yeah.
She gets like, she's much better at videoing stuff. She's done social for her own work sometimes, so she like really helps me out, but she gets really impatient because it's always like the worst time, and our apartment doesn't have always great light, so we're like fighting with the light, and minimal. I really don't want to take it too seriously
Right.
because I think it takes away from the fun
So
of it.
do you plan on continuing this series in the future? Or was it like I mean, I think you've done 10, right? I mean, which is a lot.
At 10 or 11, I did this T-shirt that I'm wearing now. That was that like I thought it would look like crap, and then I kind of got carried away, and it looks a little bit too close to the real thing.
Honestly,
Like
on
I get guys
camera,
on the street who are like, "Oh, nice," and be like,
yeah,
"No."
on camera it looks legit.
Yeah, it's a Crayola crayons. Is what I did this with.
Amazing.
I
So
try to keep it raw and like really um, simple and like just like I'm sure you felt this when you post. It's we're so tied to what we do for a living, and like say like projects dry up for a little bit and you've like or projects get canned or something and you can't share anything for a little bit. And I would get so anxious, be like, the internet cannot wait to see the next shoe I've designed, like really full of myself. Just like I cannot, like I would have projects ready to post like 6 months away from them launching, just checking every day to see when the shoe's coming out and make, oh yeah, let's go, send it. I can finally post. And then the shoes would inevitably like not have as much traction as I thought they would in my own, like grandiose imagination. And then I was like, I want to find something for me to post that's fun for me to do that isn't tied so directly, and so that I can post the other stuff when it makes sense and not force it. Also, not like post risky stuff when with like working for corporations.
right.
Sometimes it's like, yeah, like
You're towing that line a little too close.
yeah, and I've gotten like there's also like a whole generational thing. Some designers like are really against it, so sometimes you get a slap on the wrist, but that hasn't happened in a long time. But so I
Well,
want to do that.
from my perspective and the people's perspective, hopefully you keep doing it. And I always think it's funny reading the comments, and we won't segue into this, but even on the Reeboks at Connecticut too, where people, it's a lot of flame emojis, but then you get the one or two motherfuckers who are just like, oh, it looks like ACG, and it's just like, ah,
Oh
dude,
yeah, that kills me.
you guys don't even understand what you're looking at. So we won't go down that rabbit hole. We'll shift it back to a positive ending here. My last question for you, Mark.
I mean, I do kind of want to talk about the haters just for one.
All right, go ahead. Go off.
The greatest part about the bootlegs is that it attracts so much hate, and I love it because like on my own work, it was like such a criticism of like me as a creative.
Right.
And on the bootlegs, I'm like, it's a joke. Like if you write trash on my page, like you look like an idiot. Like I get people like, oh, you could just get a real job and buy the Yeezys. I'd be like, or like, oh, this isn't design, or this guy doesn't know what he's doing, or like people take it really. Some people really take it, and sometimes my own followers will go to bat for me. Be like, this guy has been doing this for years, and I find I'm like, because it's a joke and I do it as a joke. Um, when I get those, it's been a lot easier for me to on that specifically to just be like, they're not in on the joke, and then joke's on you. Like it's been a lot more. I actually on the bootlegs, I go through the comments like people say nice things, and I love that. But like the haters, I just like, oh, they get a real kick out of it. It's really funny.
All right. Well, if for any haters listening to this, keep sending it Mark's way because it's clearly driving a lot of what he's doing. um, but we will wrap up on a more positive note because that's how I like to end it. um, if you had one piece of advice to give anybody, whether it's a creative, a designer coming up, or somebody who's stuck, or somebody who struggles with imposter syndrome, or anything that you've really experienced, what's a positive thing that you could share to somebody that could potentially help change their mindset?
Be nice to people. Try to be. I mean, and this is like advice to myself. at the same time, you know, but be nice to people. It's not a very big business. Um, and don't let people bring you down. It, a lot of it has to come from you, you know, like self-motivated, like internal fire, and don't let people tamper that down. Um, and just keep at it, you know. It really, a lot of kids, I mean, kids say that likely, just like younger or future designers, aspiring designers reach out on like how to get in. Like there is no roadmap.
Yeah.
You know that like there's a lot of similarities in like, you know, obviously getting a degree like really helps, but isn't always necessary, but like really helps. You know, it's very competitive. So like knowing that it's competitive, like you have to really be driven to get in, and once you're in, it's not done. Like every level is has its own challenge. So enjoy the ride, um, enjoy the failures, and be nice to people.
I think that is great sound advice. Just be nice to people. Isn't that, it'll make the world go round a lot smoother. And your the comment about the specifically the footwear industry, it is wildly small, and your name does carry weight if you're doing the right things, and people respect that and will go to bat for you even in your Instagram comments to all the haters. So Marc VB, thank you for having a chat with me on episode 50 of An Untold Narrative. This has been awesome.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. I love the podcast. Keep doing what you do, because like as someone who's been following what you've been doing, it's been like a real pleasure to be kind of a sideline character to your story. And I you know, I really love watching you do your thing.
And I like watching you do your thing because it's also inspiring and motivating. But thanks, man.